All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today on Xactly's Innovation Station. And the goal of today's talk is to connect compensation and revenue leaders together and to provide a platform to discuss how to bring the right technology, team, processes, and strategy together to increase sales, productivity, and performance. I am super excited to have Matt Shepard with us today as our guest. Matt is the director of global sales compensation at LinkedIn. Matt and I have actually known each other for a number of years. We've been working together. We always have great conversations about the art and the science of sales team productivity, which is why we thought it would be great to have him here today. Matt is actually a member of Xactly's customer advisory board, and we view him as a key advisor to us as a company as we think about our future-looking strategy. I know I always learn something new whenever I talk to Matt, and hopefully I reciprocate with some nuggets of my own. But I'm really excited that he's here with us today. And so maybe just to kick this off, Matt, can you share with us a little bit about your professional history and your career journey and how you came into the role that you're in today?
Yeah. Good morning. And before I do that, congrats on the new appointment. So very excited to hear that news, and wish you the best of luck. I know it's going to be awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, so my journey is a little bit different in that I actually started in sales. I sold even cars, but I sold copiers for a while, and then got in with one of my clients and was one of their first sales reps, and spent some time in sales for several years, and then ended up as an account manager. So SaaS, retention is a big thing. So I moved into customer care, and then eventually into sales ops, and now very excited to be at LinkedIn on the finance side, sales compensation. So I'm getting along in years, but my experience is varied. So I've been across it all.
Wow. I mean, that must give you just an amazing perspective on sort of the end-to-end that it takes to run a sales team. I think in that perspective, it's got to be very powerful, especially in the last few years where the world has changed so much. Obviously we're now, it's probably a little bit passé to say this, we're coming out of COVID, but COVID was a really challenging time for all of us. And, post that, we got hit with some economic headwinds that have been buffeting the economies around the world. From your perspective, how has all of that impacted you, and how should compensation professionals really think about how they set their teams up for success? How do they design territories and quotas in a world that's as dynamic as the one is that we're living in today?
Yeah, no, that's a good question, observation, and experience here that we went through, still going through. But I think that there's a couple things. One is agility all the time. That's important. But, having the ability to continuously evaluate your compensation strategy and sort of the ecosystem of how you get the data and how the reps perform within that ecosystem, the tools they use, just understanding that end to end so that if something needs to change, you can react rather quickly. And then data, right? So having the data, especially, from an attainment and performance perspective, as you go. I know at LinkedIn, we do a lot of our reps are on semi-annual plans, which gives us a little bit through like a major quota market, and then set ourselves off in the right direction. So that's two of the areas that I sort of I would recommend everybody focus on: data quality, and then the ability to be agile.
Yeah. And I've always been really impressed by how agile LinkedIn is as a company. And you put some systematic things in place like the semi-annual plans and the ability to do that. But clearly, the thing about sales performance is it touches so many people in the company. It requires so many constituents to come in and work together and create that cohesive approach. How do you think about co-innovating and collaborating with that broad set of people and keeping them all sort of in lockstep?
Tough. I mean, LinkedIn's a big, actually, subsidiary of Microsoft, and I think that just having that sales point of view, I mean, at least in my head, I always think like, how's this going to benefit the rep, the manager, the folks in the field? How would they react? Like, there's a lot of comp design ideas. Let's try this. That'll incent them to sell more of this or less of this. But at the end, I always think, how is the rep going to perceive that? And, what tools can we give them to understand like as quickly as possible where they are at any given time. Gap to goal is a huge, goal for everybody. The reps should spend less time doing shadow accounting and more time just seeing their near real-time performance. So partnering with at LinkedIn, we have several divisions of what I would just call traditional sales ops, but we've got like the regional ops, and then we've got a whole nother team that's around reporting and performance and enablement. And then there's also a pretty large technical team building all the tools. So we have pretty frequent meetings. In fact, this morning I just got out of a meeting around one design element, just trying to uplift one certain specific product. And we're all on the call, and just collaboration and relationships goes a long ways. Yeah.
And how does your team, me building on that question, how does your team, inevitably there are always debates about what is the right thing to do from a comp perspective. Everybody has sort of their own preconceived notions about what works, what won't work. How does your team is obviously, sort of ends up catching the ball and having to work with it. How do you think about participating in those conversations, and what's the role that you look to play in that?
That's a great question. I consider us sort of like the stewards of what's best for the company. So you've got what's best for the reps, sales, go to market. And obviously that's going to drive the company performance, but you also need to keep in mind the cost. And, change is really hard. There can be a lot of unintended outcomes from things that you. I think my point of view is just to keep the sales rep experience in mind and in the forefront, but then on the back end, like what's best for the company. And so I think just building a trusted partnership with our sales partners around like that point of view. Obviously we want to say yes, and we try many things. That's another thing. Lots of pilots, right? And pilots don't always end up in the system, but they give you a good indication of whether something's going to stick. Are the reps going to perform as intended, or as you thought, assumed? So yeah, we do a lot of pilots at LinkedIn. Yeah,
that's great. And I think, and I love that spirit of experimentation that you guys have, of trying things, assessing how well it works, and then, moving forward with it, or just saying, okay, that one didn't work. We learn from it and we move on. I think that's a lesson that a lot of companies can learn from. In our audience today, we probably have a bunch of people from a variety of backgrounds, different tenures, people that maybe have, started their careers in sales ops, other people that have maybe moved into it over time. When you I know you as a senior person at LinkedIn, you spend a lot of time advising and mentoring folks. What's generally your kind of career guidance or career advice for people who are in this profession and are looking to grow their careers in sales operations?
Yeah, no, that's I do spend a lot of time just discussing with some of the folks on my team, like what's next. LinkedIn actually has a term that we use all the time called "What's your next play?" Whether it's internal or external. It's there's T-shirts like "What's your next play?" So we're always thinking about what's next. And I think when you're younger or starting something new, you tend to stay focused on just the silo that you're in. But looking outside and understanding like what's really going on. I'm paying compensation. Why? What does commission have to do with sales performance? Why is sales performance so important? Just understanding the end to end. And I would think a lot of on the benefit tremendously from spending some time in traditional sales ops to actually be building territories, assigning quotas, mapping leads to opportunities, seeing deals close, sitting amongst the sales team, feeling that energy. Those are all things that will just broaden your perspective and make you a more effective commissions compensation kind of pro, in my opinion. I think that's just given me so much appreciation for the effort that it takes to sell. It's hard.
Yeah. That's great. And I think, one of the things that I've always really enjoyed about your approach to the world is you are thinking about the big picture, but then you also think about the sales rep experience. And you talked about that a bit. And I think that's an area where I think a lot of people who are in your role are always thinking about, how do I make the rep experience better? What are the key things that they need? As you've worked through that problem space, what have been the key things that you've learned, or what are the key sort of like principles that you follow when you think about the sales rep experience?
Yeah, I mean, easier said than done, but try to keep it simple. right? You shouldn't have to jump to 50 different places just to see how much credit you've earned and how much commission you're going to get paid. That's my number one tenet, I'd say, is trying to keep it simple. But, you know, as companies grow and teams become a little bit less like more siloed, I guess, in the process, it's really difficult to do. So keeping it simple is an aspiration, but it's a good guiding principle. And then, you know, also just staying close to the field. So I think a lot of times commission professionals and even some of the sales ops, like traditional sales ops, they don't spend as much time with the reps and experiencing what the reps actually do. You know, they look at it from a systemic or process point of view, but they don't actually witness it. And I think that that's something I always try to, you know, keep relationships with sales professionals that I've known over the years, just to bounce things off them and see has anything changed. I think that's important too.
That's a great perspective. And I think, you know, from what I've observed is, you know, sales operations and compensation folks, when they are, to be fair, they're very busy in their day-to-day jobs. And so finding that time to make that connection with the sales team and sort of, you know, walk in the shoes or walk in the perspective of the sales rep is something that not a lot of people do. And I think I can imagine it being very valuable. So with that, I think, you know, we also wanted to make sure that we took questions from the audience. So we've had some questions come in. So the first question, this is sort of a topical question. So the audience is asking, you know, what kind of ways are you imagining working with generative AI?
Yeah, that is topical. Everybody's talking about it. I think it's going to vary. I mean, I think as of, you know, right now, there are some tools and some, you know, some ideas that have kind of surfaced over the last, I don't know, year and a half. I mean, Xactly's insights for a while now. So I think that what I see a lot of value in is predicting. So a lot of the modeling that goes on, you know, outside of just paying compensation, there's a lot of compensation expense forecasting, compensation expense modeling, sales forecast modeling. I think that AI can bring a lot of value there. And then probably within the processes themselves. I mean, I'd love to see a day when some of the, you know, audits and the things that commission analysts do to check their work, that can be, I mean, we could really use AI there as well. I don't know. What do you see coming?
Yeah, I mean, we're obviously very excited about it. And historically, you know, we have been, we've had an asset in our portfolio, which is around the data that we collect in conjunction with our customers. And so we're, you know, the only company that has that data asset. And obviously that is the raw fuel that powers generative AI and AI algorithms. I think from our perspective, as we've looked at generative AI, we announced our Xactly AI Copilot back in August. And the way we've thought about it is in sort of a few different steps. The first step is, how can we leverage generative AI to improve the user experience around our products? You know, if you think about the traditional software paradigm, it's effectively a form that sits on a database. Someone goes in, puts data in the form, and then extracts that data later for a different process. We fundamentally now think that that hunting and pecking paradigm can now be much more of a conversation with the system. So instead of going into a report and clicking and double clicking and triple clicking to get to an answer, you can now have a conversation with the system and say, tell me what's happening in my, you know, from an attainment perspective, tell me what's happening in terms of overall performance, show me a distribution of my reps. And instead of having to build that every time, you can just have that conversation. I think the beauty of that is it's going to make the data much more accessible to a wider variety of people, not just people who understand how to work with the system and how the data is structured. We think that's step one, and we're doing a lot of work in that area.
That's huge. Yeah, I think the natural language, or what you just talking to the system, is really going to enable a lot of people like that wouldn't know how to write SQL queries, for instance. You can go in and say, just give me what I'm looking for. Here it comes. So I agree.
Yeah, awesome. And so I think that's, you know, from our perspective, the stuff that we'll be putting out is sort of in that area. The second thing we think is what you talked about, which in terms of automation of workflows. Like if you think about, especially in the comp world, so much goes into figuring out, well, how do I take this idea we had in the comp plan and make it a reality in the system so that it's manageable and executable and it works well. We're imagining a world where you're not doing that through a set of interfaces. What happens if you can have a conversation with the system and say, here's what I'd like you to do. Here's what I'd like the comp plan to look like. Go off and provision that for me and then send me a link so I can test it, right? Awesome. And I think that, again, to the idea of like bringing down sort of the level of knowledge you need to run the systems, I think could be really exciting for users.
Yeah, I'm hoping that there's all different theories around what is this going to mean to the workers, but I mean, just about everybody on my team would like a lot more time to actually think about to analyze things, not administer things. So I think just taking the administration out of it and giving them more time back to do what they're here for is going to be a huge win.
Yeah,
really powerful.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. So we've got a couple more questions. So one from Ruby Avery. Ruby asks, what are the most effective ways you've aligned sales and finance?
Yeah, we touched on it a little bit. I mean, I think just trust for one, being a trusted partner, having those regular, I mean, I'm not the only one. There are several people within our team that have regular meetings with sales and design. We call it comp design. So there's some HR, like Total Rewards partner, and then sales leadership, sales SOPs, traditional SOPs, and then us. So we are through the year. I mean, not just at the beginning of the launch cycle, but through the year, continuously talking about what's working, what isn't, what are we looking to do in the future? Can we start to build now for something for next year? So it's having that we're just an extension of each other, right? It's like one team. So that's how we've approached it, and it seems to be working.
Yeah,
always room for improvement, but that's the direction that we're going.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, we see, and I think that notion of continuous collaboration is so powerful, because sometimes companies get, in a mode where those groups only talk when it's time to make a change or create the new plan. And then there's a lot of context that gets lost as a result of that. Awesome. Another question from Eric Berman. Eric asks, I often get the question on how can we pay sales reps on a weekly basis? I am not a fan. Are you seeing a shift in paying sales reps more often than on a monthly basis?
I have heard, there's been discussions, not just at LinkedIn in my career, that's been discussed. And I think it really depends on the complexity of your comp design. I think some things need like the month to settle. At least at LinkedIn, we're spending a lot of time preparing data throughout the month. And I think a weekly would be more like a preliminary. So I would say if you're thinking about that, you might want to approach it as like a preliminary weekly that gets trued up like the month. But yeah, I mean, I think if you're looking for real-time performance incentives, weekly is a good aspiration. But yeah, I haven't seen that as like the industry standard. It's more like on the edge. Yeah.
And I don't think we have seen it either. Okay, good question. Next question comes from Jeff Hopsheen. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. First, he gives you a shout out. So shout out to Matt.
Hey, Jeff.
He says, question for both of you. In your opinion, what is the biggest gap in service features provided by ICM solutions on the marketplace? What would bridging this gap bring to benefit sales operations?
Yeah, Jeff, you got me. He knows my pet peeve. But no, I think what you touched on earlier with AI hopefully can help. It is difficult to configure the end-to-end. Usually the ICM sits at the very end of the train, and you have to get your participant information from somewhere. You have to get your credits from somewhere else. Sometimes you have to do additional things like splits or swaps, or like we call them post-closed won adjustments. And getting that all clean and functional outside of the ICM is job one. And then, any shortcomings that the ICM might have, it's more of a perception, I think, because the data is just not there. So you really can't build upstream processes in the system that's there to calculate the credits. And that's a challenge. But hopefully with natural language or some of the AI, go provision this, maybe that could hook through this ecosystem and not just be Xactly, but other data feeds as well.
Yeah. I think our perspective on this is that what we find is in every company, there's a set of commonalities when it comes to how they work comp and how they process it. But in every company, there's always something that's sort of specific to that company, right?
Yeah.
And that specificity comes from you're trying a new strategy, the industry that you're in, how the business has grown over time. And I think historically, ICM vendors have not done a great job handling those specific use cases. They've kind of left it to the customer, like, okay, well, maybe you can go do that offline or go build your own thing.
Yeah.
We released something about 6 months ago we call Extend, which LinkedIn has some experience with. And our view is that what we need to be able to do is provide a prepackaged yet extensible application.
Yep.
One that you can easily extend to your use cases and make that extensibility maintainable, deeply integrated with the core prepackaged functionality. And I think that approach allows us hopefully to span the workflows that you're having to manage.
Yeah, I agree. I'm excited about that. I really do think that's going to help close that gap.
Yeah. Great. Okay, well, I am getting the high sign here from from the folks who are monitoring this to you, and we'll look forward to having you at our next innovation station. I want to thank Matt for taking the time. He's really busy, so I appreciate him coming to our offices and spending some time with us. And we'll all see you soon.